It's been a hot minute since Overkill debuted damage range and multipliers. In the open beta, almost everyone said that it was a bad idea. Of course, that didn't stop Overkill from adding it in anyway, and then never doing another open beta to ask for community feedback again. Since then, a lot about the game has changed, and we've all been forced to live with damage range multipliers. But how have these multipliers aged? Did they even do anything in the first place? All this and more is coming up. On release, there were two arguments that could be made in support of multipliers. The first was for the sake of balance, and the second was for the sake of encouraging weapon variety. Let's put both of these reasons under a critical eye to see their validity. In terms of balance, there was little reason to use assault rifles pre-DRM, because LMGs could just do everything better. At least I guess that's how Overkill saw it. In reality, rifles struck a balance of single target DPS and crowd DPS that other weapons didn't. LMGs were great at dealing with crowds, but not so much with dozers or boss enemies, but rifles were. The reason for that is because low blow needs concealed weapons to use, and the damage that you gain from it is silly. But balancing crits is a different monster than what I want to talk about here. The point is that there was a reason to use rifles over LMGs, just not one that was optimal for most players. Payday 2 is a crowd shooter, so to optimize for a specific scenario over a general one doesn't really make sense for a majority of players. This is just an example of two weapon types, but the idea extends to all weapons. We'll come back to balance, but let's examine the second argument in support of multipliers, encouraging variety. Before DRM, the variety was weak. I can only speak for Death Sentence, but variety consisted of only a fraction of the weapons available. I can't really blame the players for sticking to what they know, the highest difficulty is somewhat tough after all. Using something you're comfortable with and not exploring other choices is understandable, especially if you're using something that's strong. As you can see, both of these arguments are really more or less the same thing. The balance creates strong weapons, and players use those strong weapons ignoring everything else. Now, were these goals achieved by DRM on release? Let's start again from balance. All weapons aside from rifles and specials were hit with different levels of falloff. This did act as a buff in a roundabout way. Lowering the damage of almost every weapon in the game does make the rifle damage higher, at least relatively. Oh, except for one small little oversight. Sniper rifles got reverse falloff, which is to say they get stronger with range. So, what gives? Before the update, sniper rifles were already the strongest in the game. There's no situation in the game in which you didn't want to use a sniper rifle over another gun, save for something like Safe House Nightmare. Thanks to Graze, sniper rifles were enemy deleters. Considering that Payday 2 is a horde shooter, and the danger comes from swarms of enemies, being able to remove a spawn group in a single shot is beyond powerful. If you think of sniper rifles as fast-firing, fast-reloading hit-scan grenade launchers, you can see the issue. So alright, the balancing kinda worked if you ignore snipers, which to be honest is a very big ask. Did the falloff encourage variety? Well, say you had a build that you liked. Now it just does less damage after an arbitrary cutoff that you can't do anything about. To some people, whatever, not a big deal. To others, well, there go all of your calculated breakpoints. Why deal with a random cutoff that kills your hard work when you can just use an AR or sniper? And I can assure you that no one went, oh boy, I want to do less damage, and then picked a certain weapon because of the multipliers. The multipliers did the opposite of encouraging variety. I had never seen so many rifles being played over anything else than when DRM came out. And it's not like people used all the rifles, they only stuck to the best options there anyway. Well, the multipliers failed one of their goals completely, and the other was kinda okay if you look past a couple massive issues. However, that was many months ago. How about those 2 points now? Again, let's take a look at balance first. If the goal was to buff rifles, then the multiplier succeeded in a weird way. However, in a later update, almost every rifle was buffed to some extent. At this point in time, rifles are now the dominant weapon type, well save for snipers, and akimbo SMGs. Overkill overcorrected with balance changes, and now the multipliers do nothing for balance, so you might as well just remove them. Now for encouraging variety, well, no. Just like they didn't encourage variety on release, they don't encourage it now. In fact, thanks to the overcorrecting I mentioned, there's even less reason to use a variety of weapons over rifles. If you have been paying attention, you would have noticed that the multipliers were never really needed, and that they utterly failed the goals that they entered the game with. But just in case, I figured it would be worth testing. Using epic hacks from the Cheat Workshop, I removed damage range multipliers. I then teamed up with Bay1K, who is not a cheater like me, and we made the same builds using the same weapons and decks. There would be 4 tests: Rogue Micro Uzi, Anarchist Predator, Armorer KSP, and X-Press Triple SMG. The first game was on Alaskan Deal. The Micro Uzi is such a fun gun without multipliers, and since I could do more than one granule of damage at range, I decided to build the Micro Uzi for accuracy for the first time in many millennia. I gotta say, it felt very nice to be able to kill things at range. I mean, I could do damage to dozers beyond just pestering them with tiny numbers. So, does this mean that not having multipliers made the Micro Uzi OP? Well, no. Bay kept up with me in kills so closely that the multipliers made no significant difference, but from my perspective, I just felt better using the gun. The second game was on Ukrainian Prisoner, a pretty wide open map, so the multipliers should make a big difference here, especially while using shotguns, right? Nope. The Predator is a spam weapon, and even though I had guaranteed one shot on heavies with Zerk, and Bay didn't, we both spammed shots in such a way to clear out enemies more or less equally. So did the multipliers make no difference here either? Not quite. I did find that I had an advantage in one case. Whenever there was a single enemy by themselves, for whatever reason, I knew that I only needed to click once to kill him. That is technically an advantage, but the Predator is great on ammo economy, so one shot versus two didn't really make a difference in the grand scheme of things, especially when you pick up like 5. The third game was Brooklyn Bank, and I think you can imagine how this one went too. Like the last maps, our effectiveness was basically the same, but this one makes more sense than the others. Brooklyn Bank isn't a very wide open map. Well, it is, but no competent player would ever bother with the enemies way out in the middle of nowhere, when you just need to hold inside the bank. Which means that the multipliers don't really even do anything on this map, no matter what you play, unless you choose to pick off enemies at a range for some reason. The final game was on Hoxton Breakout Day 2, and again, the multipliers made no real difference other than the satisfaction of killing enemies at range without spending the entire magazine. Not that it happened all too much, because Breakout Day 2 is a map where you don't really need to engage long-distance enemies. However, just because it seems like there's no difference doesn't mean that there isn't one. Why not just check with statistics? Assuming the null that there is no difference between kill counts with multipliers and no multipliers, a chi-square test shows a somewhat low p-value, which actually means the assumption was wrong, and the multipliers do make a significant difference. Huh. However, considering the fact that Bay disconnected on Brooklyn Bank and I skill issued on Breakout, and just used the numbers from before then, well, the p-value shoots up to almost 86%. Since this is way higher than the commonly accepted 5 or 10, we fail to reject the null. That just means that there's no statistically significant difference between kill counts with multipliers and no multipliers. What a shocker. I'm as surprised as you are. On average, I ended up killing 21 more enemies than Bay, which is about 3 spawn groups. This isn't a perfect test because Payday isn't an extremely consistent game, but it gives you a good enough idea. The conclusion that can be drawn from both theory and practice is that multipliers were never needed and aren't needed, didn't achieve their goals and never will, and only serve to make gameplay less fun. Multipliers either do nothing or actively punish you for playing weapons that you liked. Though, let's be real, you didn't need a video to tell you that. Just about anyone can tell that the system at its core doesn't work in a game like Payday 2. You can't control your range of interaction in this game. You either kill the enemy where it stands, or you die trying to move forward or backward to get into said optimal range. In this way, multipliers can only annoy you for playing weapons impacted by them. Like I said, seemingly everyone knows this already except for Overkill. I have no idea why they won't just admit to their mistake and revert this anti-player change. Either that, or at least rework it into something functional. But that would be work and take forethought, and we know Overkill already didn't consider the latter of those options. Overkill has shown that they're willing to fix old content, with the update to fix Berserker, pocket ECMs, and enemies shooting in animations. So here's to hoping that they change this massive mistake too.
I think it's fair to say that, like, performance-wise, there's no real difference.
Yeah. Oh, that was kind of lame, Chris.